Hello everyone, we are today at the Deutsche Panzermuseum Munster and the director Ralf Rath will now explain to you the Panzeruniform.
Thank you very much. The Panzer uniforms are very unusual for the uniform set of the Third Reich or the National Socialism era because it's a rather modern uniform. The design of all the uniforms in the National Socialist era is rather backwards. It's traditional, it's dashing, it's attractive for many persons, but it's not modern. The Wehrmacht especially is quite old-fashioned. The Panzer uniform in this set of uniforms is rather modern. This begins with the way it's cut. It's supposed to be inspired by the skiing clothes of the time. I never saw an actual source for this, but it makes sense. It definitely is in the trend of shorter jackets, which were in favor in the 30s. So it's at least in the modern mainstream, in the fashion mainstream of the time. It's usually referred to as very attractive in the sources of the time, in the later memoirs, as well as the sources of the time itself. It's said to be very attractive on the persons, and you can see this in the special case, this uniform we have in this museum. The jacket is normally short, but the owner of this jacket even made it shorter at the tailor, so it's more dashing, it's more modern in the sense of the time. That's the first point. The second point is the color. The color is very distinct, everybody knows it, the black Panzer jacket. And the reason for that is usually said that oil and grease is not to be seen on the uniform as well as, let's say, on gray. And that makes sense because in the beginning, these uniforms were only to be used if you were actually working in and on the tank. Later on, this regulation fell out of fashion, everybody ignored it, but in the beginning that was actually the working uniform on the vehicle. So it makes sense to design them black to cover up the most obvious oil and grease spots. There is this legend that the color is related to certain Prussian cavalry regiments. There is no source evidence for that. It makes not really sense because in Germany the transfer from the cavalry to the panzers is not as in other states. The German panzers come more from the motorized branch of transport and logistics, not from the cavalry. So I think the explanation, the black color coming from a workman's-like attitude, is the correct one. Another aspect of this uniform being modern is that there's never to be worn a saber with it. The National Socialists made a great deal of giving everybody a side weapon, be it a dagger, a saber, a sword. Diplomats, even people working on the trains or in the emergency units, everybody wore a dagger or a sidearm, a pistol, anything like that. That's one of the points how the National Socialism is, on the one hand, modern, because everybody had the chance to achieve the status to own such a weapon. On the other hand, it's very backwards because it's a very atavistic weapon to have a sword or a saber at their side. The Panzer uniform explicitly was never to be worn with a blade at its side. There are some photos where you can see this, but these are special ceremonies and they are not the norm, they are the exception. The cut of the jacket overall, and especially in this area, is unusual. The idea behind that is that there are as few points where you can get tangled with the tank, with the handles or whatever you have, the rivets or whatever. The uniform was supposed to be as smooth as possible, so there's no decoration. They are not the usual double-breasted front of uniforms. It's just as smooth as possible. And the open jacket is very unusual. If you think what makes a Wehrmacht uniform, it's usually the stiff neck. It's the neck that's held up by the uniform. Not here. You have the possibility to move your head around. You could close this in case of great cold or so, but it was seldomly done. This is the usual way it was worn all the time, mostly. Older classical elements are the Waffengattungsfarben, the color of the branch you're serving in. In this case, it's the classical Panzertruppen. You have the normal shoulder pieces, you have everything regarding decorations, the Hoheitszeichen, everything is normal on the uniform itself. One thing That's a classical tale about the Panzer uniform, is that they are in the later parts of the war are often mistaken for SS uniforms. The Allgemeine SS, the Standard SS, sported a black uniform, and it sported also death heads. The death heads of the Panzertruppe are their classical design. It's one of the things that makes this uniform classical. The death head is most certainly also not of Prussian origin. You always hear that certain cavalry regiment sported them, and the Panzer took them over because they wanted to have this tradition. But again, there is no real cavalry tradition in the German Panzers. Most likely, these skulls are taken from the A7V German tanks in the First World War, which were often decorated with painted skulls. So the tankers of the 30s referred to the tankers of the year 1918 and the Revolution, where the government troops who drove tanks in the revolution or against the revolution painted death heads on their tanks. So that's most likely the source of this skull. So we have black jackets in the case of the SS and the Panzer, and both have skulls on them. Point is, the skulls of the Panzertruppe and the skulls of the SS are distinctly different to us because we know it. We have books about that, we have the internet, and we have the actual information at our hands. At the time, the Allied soldiers only knew black uniforms with death head could be or could not be SS. The SS uniform on the whole is completely different design. Even beside the death heads, you have the classical double-breasted cut. The eagle is, as usual with the SS, not on the breast but on the arm. So if you know all these details, you can easily distinct them from each other. But at the time, of course, nobody on the Allied side had this information. So Panzertruppe and SS were often confused. Adding to the confusion was the fact that nobody knew where was the border between Waffen-SS and SS. Spoiler, there was none, but that's another topic. So in many cases, Panzertruppen were on the spot executed by Allied people who thought they have SS soldiers in front of them, assuming they are fanatical elite soldiers and have to be taken out on the spot. So that's one tragic aspect of the design, of the similar design on the SS and the Panzertruppen side. Is that roughly what you wanted, Bernhard?
I think we got everything. Anything? I mean, maybe talk a bit about the
cuff-band, of course, the cuff-band. This is a uniform from the Großdeutschland unit that, in several instances, units were awarded as a distinct honor, a cuff-band, which showed to which unit a soldier belonged. It was a point of great honor, and at least on one occasion, Hitler, as punishment, decided that a unit had to give back the cuff-band. Yeah, that's it. That's basically it. It's one distinct design element. It's not a medal or an Abzeichen in German. There's a smaller version, but it's a distinct unit honor. Yes.
And it was elite army unit.
Perceived elite. Yes. There are several cuff-bands of units who are not in the classical sense elite, but
I mean the particular one. I meant the Großdeutschland.
This, yes.
Yeah. And you can also see it at.
Right, exactly. That's another field. So when we started this video, we decided to say something about the Panzeruniform and the confusion with the SS. The science of the Wehrmacht uniforms is a whole other field. They are thick books because the variety of shoulder pieces, cuff bands, special ornamentations are in the thousands, not metaphorically, literally. There are thousands of combinations of colors, epaulettes, cuff bands, everything you name. Basically, every special occupation in the Wehrmacht had at least one special symbol on its shoulder, on its arm. These aren't even here. It's very, very complicated. There are exotic combinations that even active soldiers in the Wehrmacht didn't know. So you could stand beneath a comrade and see his color and his sign on the arm. And I have no idea what the guy is doing in the Wehrmacht. It's very complicated. In this case, what's seen on the epaulette, it's an Oberleutnant. So it's the epaulette for an officer, which is automatically Lieutenant in this time, and one star for the Oberleutnant. And you see the GD for Großdeutschland. So sometimes regiments were represented on the shoulder. Sometimes what you did was represented. Sometimes whole other things were. It's a great great variety of things that can be shown there.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Some final additional remarks on the uniform here. Sadly, we don't have the complete history about this particular uniform. So we don't know to whom this uniform belonged to, and as such, we have no context on the awards earned. Although it is very likely that the awards are original ones. Hence, I will shortly discuss them here. For those that know my Iron Cross video, you will immediately notice that this soldier earned an Iron Cross 2nd class. This is indicated by this ribbon here. Note that the Iron Cross 2nd class was worn only in the buttonhole of the uniform during the day of the award. Although it could also be ordered to be worn that way on special occasions. The next awards are the 2 Panzervernichtungsabzeichen on the right sleeve. Panzervernichtungsabzeichen means literally tank destruction badge. Note, this was not the official name. The official name was a bit more extensive, namely Sonderabzeichen für das Niederkämpfen von Panzerkampfwagen durch Einzelkämpfer, or Special Badge for the destruction of tanks by individual fighters in English. It was introduced in March 1942, yet could be awarded retroactively from 22nd June 1941 onwards, when Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union, started. This badge required that one destroyed a tank in close combat, so using the gun of a tank or anti-tank gun did not qualify. Since January 1944, kills with the Panzerschreck and Panzerfaust were also recognized. Assuming that these badges are genuine to the uniform, there are 2 likely scenarios how these were earned. One is that the crew member left his tank and destroyed enemy tanks in close combat. Another one is that there was no tank available and the owner of the uniform was fighting as an infantryman. Big thank you here to the Panzermuseum Munster for inviting me, especially to the curator of the Panzermuseum, Laura Händel, for preparing the uniform and providing further information. Special thanks to my Patreon and Subscriber supporters for making trips like this possible. As always, sources are listed in the description. Thank you for watching and see you next time.